What's up, boys? This is the start of a new thing I'm gonna be doing. Just tutorial series, of course, because I'm a producer on YouTube, so I gotta do a tutorial series, of course. And I'll just be explaining different shit about producing to up-and-coming producers, people that kind of have a slight grasp on like different keywords and different things you can do inside programming, different DAWs, different formats, different type beats, all shit like that. You kind of get a grasp on like what you're starting to do. You're just worried and learning about the ins and outs of it. And I'm here to explain that shit to you, because I don't quite understand it either. And I'll explain it as best as I know it to someone else. So that's probably gonna work, right? So yeah, if you like the format that this video is working with, comment that you like it. You know how that works. You can think for your goddamn self. If you want to comment, do that shit. If you want to send me some of your shit that you're making, I'll have my email down below. It's empire8bar@gmail.com. You can send me some of your shit, some of your work, some of your rap. If you're a rapper or an artist or another beat maker that would like to work with me, you can send to that same email. Yeah, that's the rundown. Enjoy this shit. Later, boys. So I guess the main point of making this video is if you're making beats and you find that the finished product, the kicks are getting drowned out by the 808s or by the main sample, or vice versa, the main sample is getting drowned out by the kicks, getting drowned out by the bass and the main sample are clashing, anything like that, this should help you. And I have 3 tips for it. Number 1, EQing. Alright guys, so I assume you know about certain words and like catchwords and stuff like that in producing, like compressor, EQ, stuff like that. So I'm assuming you have a basic grasp and you're an up-and-coming producer. So maybe producing for a couple months, few weeks, a year, you know what I'm saying? Just up-and-coming producer. You know the ins and outs. You're just wondering the in-depths about everything. So EQing is the first step I have to making your drums not clash with everything, or your kicks not clash with everything. So what I would want to do here, sorry, this is what I was writing. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. I know this girl. She a real good girl. Just throw your kick into an EQ, okay? An equalizer. So your equalizer will look like one of these 2 things or a combination of both. It'll show you your gain, which is how loud each part of a sound is going, and then the frequency, which is each part of a sound. So kicks are low end, snaps, hats, hi-hats, claps, snares, all that stuff's high end. And then a lot of the time your samples, some of your drums, toms, stuff like that will fall kind of in the middle, where it's high and low kind of at the same time. And your vocals a lot of the time will fall in the middle. So what you want to do is throw your kick into an EQ and find out what's the sharpest part of your kick. So what you're going to want to do is throw your kick into an EQ and then bring the volume all the way up on your kick so it's coming through as hard as you can, okay? So in this case, your kick's coming in at 95. So what you're going to want to do is write that down. So 95 for your frequency, and that's what your kick's coming in at. And remember that. And then whatever your problem sound is, whatever you think your kick isn't punching through hard enough, so like let's say 808 in this case. So let's say I have a bass, like boom, boom, but the kick's not punching through that bass enough. So what you're going to do now is throw the bass into the EQ, okay? So take the kick out of the EQ, and then with the bass, you'll see that there's a lot of just low end. So it'll probably just end up doing something along the lines of this. I'm not going to fill it up all the way. Your 808s will look a lot like that, where it's very low end and it kind of pushes into mids a little bit and then falls off at highs. So what you're going to do is go back to your kick, which was 95. Remember, your kick was 95 on frequency. Go to frequency right here, and then you're going to want to drag down the 95% on the frequency. So let me drag this down. So what you'll notice is if you drag that part down, there's a little cut at 95, but all the other bass is still there. So there's still the low end that'll make it shake. There's still the little bit of high end that'll make it cut through stuff, but there's not that specific 95 where your kick comes in. And then what that should do is it should let your kick, which we'll represent with this red, I guess, well, it'll let your kick kind of fit right into that slot that you brought down instead of having to fight for that spot. This is number 2. Tip number 2 for make your kicks sound better. So what you're going to want to do is this. On all DAWs, DAWs, digital audio workshops, or workstations, whatever you want to say, there's going to be an attack setting on every sample or sound or anything you put into the DAW to make music out of. So let's put our big bad 808 on here. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to turn the attack down and make it so it ducks the beginning. So what attack does, so let's put a fake little knob here. If you move that knob, it'll move an attack line above the thing. Okay? So if I move the knob and I turn it down a little bit, it'll move that attack line up. So let's move it up right there, alright? So what that does is makes it so everything before that attack line in this sample will duck. It'll still play at the same time it's supposed to play, but it'll duck and mute itself and then play the rest of it out. Yeah, that was a good way of explaining it. It was kind of weird I wouldn't be able to explain attack, but that's a pretty good way of explaining it. You can move a line, anything before that line, the attack line, will duck and mute itself, but it'll still play at the same time. I think that makes sense. So if we move that line right here, just a little bit into a kick, okay? Or to an 808. So it doesn't just bang so hard when it first hits. It'll make all that beginning part, so right here, everything before this line, it'll make it duck down and almost mute. It'll pretty much just mute it out. And then the rest of it will ride out like bass. It'll still kind of rattle, but it just won't have that thump, and it won't attack so hard. So that's why they call it attack. So now that we don't have all this space right here, it sounds really weird in a beat. Like your beat will sound killer, it'll knock if you just have 808s and the rest of your beat going, but you want to have that kick, because that kick just drives it home, really makes it thump. So now that we have that, it's going to sound weird. It's going to go, like it's going to make a U shape. It's going to sound like what a U looks like. I know I sound like I'm having a fucking stroke, but that's the only way I can explain it. It'll completely duck that first part off. You'll still get that hum behind the bass, but it won't like thump right at the beginning. It'll thump like a half second after. So now we have all this open space that sounds kind of weird, but there's no kick really fitting that spot. So if only we had a kick, dude, that like we just couldn't get to fit anywhere, because it would fit right there where we made it duck out perfectly, and then it would boom, boom, because the 808's ducking down when the kick hits and then riding out after that. So that is another great way to make your kicks hit harder, is adjust your attack so that everything below the line ducks, and just make it just as long as your kick is, and it'll make it duck just as long as your kick plays, and then the bass will ride out after that. So attack dial, use that bitch. I'm doing it right now. Tip number 3, and probably the most reliable of all the tips shown today: a side chain. It's on my compressor. I'll show you a snippet of where I find mine on my DAW. It might be different on yours, but this is where I find mine. Alright, so this is my DAW. So right here is our crazy ass sample. And what we're going to do with this, we're going to add a plugin, and that plugin is going to be a compressor. And then up here in the compressor settings, there's a side chain input setting. So our problem sounds the crazy, our trigger sound goes right here, and this is where all your other sounds will come up. Let's say there's a kick in here, click the kick. Every time this kick happens, it'll cut out this crazy sound. I hope that explained it good. So what you have is you have a problem sound, okay? This isn't what the technical term is in the program. This is what I came up with, okay? So you gotta figure out which one's which, okay? So our problem sound, your problem sound would be the sound that's happening that's drowning out the sound that you want to cut through. So our problem sound in this scenario would be the 808. That nasty 808 we keep talking about that keeps cutting our kicks so we can't even hear them. So that's our problem sound, is the 808s, okay? So 808 is our problem sound. So what you're going to do is you're going to open a side chain on top of your 808, alright? So we're going to draw a little fake sample for the 808 again. That's our 808, okay? That's our problem sound. That's what we put the side chain on, okay? You put the side chain on the problem sound, okay? Then your side chain will have a setting in it that'll say input, I think. So also trigger is just input, is another word for trigger. So your trigger or your input sound would be the sound that you want to cut through your problem sound. So for us, that would be the kick. So our kick would be our trigger sound. So then we'll set, in the sidechain settings, we'll put kick as our input. Okay? So here's our little kick. And what that will do is it makes it so whenever this trigger sound happens, it makes this problem sound cut out for as long as this trigger sound lasts, if that makes sense. So for as long as this kick lasts, so it'll chop the 808, or not chop, it'll cut it down. So it'll lower it and mute it for as long as this kick lasts. And you can change the intensity. It doesn't have to mute it all the way. It can mute it kinda. It can just sit on top of it very nice if you tweak the side chain and the input settings a little bit. You'll get the hang of that once you get into it. So side chain problem sound is the sound that's drowning out the sound that you want to cut through, and then your trigger or your input inside the side chain is whatever sound you want to cut through the other sound. So for right now, we want our kick to cut through our 808. So our input is our kick, which means that every time the kick happens, it cuts out our problem sound, which is an 808. I hope I explained these things well. If I didn't, leave a comment that says I'm a piece of shit and tell me how to fix it. Alright? Tell me how to fix my shittery. That's pretty much it, guys. Drop a like, drop a share, drop a comment if you like this format with the whiteboard and me explaining just how to make beats and production, because I'm going through it too, guys. I'm just kind of learning as I go, and I've been doing it for about 2.5 years. So I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can explain some of the basic to an up-and-coming producer. So, yeah, do that shit. Later, guys.